Now, today does mark 50 days since the invasion by Russia of the Ukraine. Many people in Wiltshire have been doing their bit to help people in Ukraine, donating money, goods, and even travelling to the border in Poland to deliver aid. Ukrainian officials have even been to Salisbury Plains military training area to see what equipment the UK can offer them. Well, in the news today, Moscow has accused Ukraine of carrying out airstrikes on a residential area just over the border in Russia, injuring 7 people. The claims, though, haven't been verified. Russia had previously warned it would bomb targets in Kyiv if Ukrainian forces attacked any of its territory. Well, Ukraine have said their missiles had damaged the Russian flagship in the Black Sea, a claim that has been disputed by Moscow. Someone who's following this, perhaps more than most, is Professor Peter Caddick Adams from near Salisbury. Peter is Director of the Defence and Global Security Institute, as well as a military historian. He's currently in Croatia, but joins me on BBC Radio Wiltshire now. Peter, thank you for joining me. This war, this invasion, did you see it coming?
I have to say I did, Graham, and I'm not surprised by most of the dots that have been joined up in the 2 months, the 50 days that we've had. And this is what I was teaching at the UK Defence Academy for at least since 2014. I didn't think it would go as extreme as it has done. I certainly hadn't anticipated the sort of war crimes angle and the dirty fighting that's been involved. But I did see Vladimir Putin squaring up for no good in Ukraine and extending his campaign and his land grab from the Donbass region in the east and the Crimea to something far more, which is where we are today.
Where do you see, I mean, this is a huge question, I appreciate, but where do you see this going? How is this going to be resolved? Because one way or another, eventually, it will come to an end. But what path do you think it's going to take?
Well, so much of Vladimir Putin's pride and his past performance in terms of the way he's galvanized Russia, he's mobilized public opinion, he's controlled the media, he's controlled his oligarchs. He's really pinned his colours to the mast on this one, and there's no way he can wriggle out of this without carrying on the war. So I think this is going to go on for months, if not years. He is going to wriggle and squirm and try and pull something positive out of it. Of course, he's bitten off far more than he can chew, and he's achieved the opposite result. I mean, NATO looks set to gain at least another couple of countries, with Finland and Sweden lightly, I think, is fair to say at the moment, joining NATO in the next couple of months. The opposite of what he wanted, and remembered the threats he was issuing to the world on the 24th of February when this whole thing started.
It hasn't gone anywhere near as he expected and had hoped. He's met far more resistance than he expected. And I think, the rest of the world have condemned, quite rightly, what he's done.
Yeah, I mean, I've spent 35 years in mostly the reserve forces. I've done my exercises on Salisbury Plain. I've lectured at most of the military institutions sort of in the county. And, we were always trained to expect first a Soviet and then a Russian threat. And now it's materialized. And we all thought that Russia would be this great big invincible giant that it always proclaimed and advertised itself to be. And so ever since this has been kicking off, I've been waiting for the sort of the shock around the corner that Russia is really not as bad as it's making itself out to be. And yet each and every time, they've stumbled with so many logistical and tactical mistakes. And we've given Vladimir Putin, it seems, a shovel, and he's determined to dig himself into the biggest and most stupid hole he can possibly conceive of. But I don't see a quick end to it, sadly.
What about the people on the streets in Russia? What about the everyday man and woman living and working in Russia? What are they being told? What do they believe is what's happening in Ukraine?
Well, what I've been saying is, our fight is with the Russian leader and his team, not with the ordinary Russian people. They have been hoodwinked. They have been brainwashed in the way that Nazi Germany brainwashed its own people in the Second World War. And where we are today is the German Reich in about 1944 or 45, with people sort of completely bound in, often reluctantly, to the state's vision and the state's purpose. And the conscripts heading off towards Ukraine are doing so reluctantly. Their parents don't want them to go. They don't want them to go. And even the regulars, some of them are refusing in the Russian Federation to serve, and they're being court-martialed. So, even from that point of view, it's going wrong for the Russians in ways that they understand. And that's before you get all the protests. And a lot are really wise to the fact that those with access to international media, that this isn't going as planned. They're aware that there are far more casualties than anyone could have expected, and really that this is a war. This isn't a special military operation just within a few square miles of the border. And the longer it goes on, the more difficult it is to keep the wraps on something like. So whether we'll end up with a Russian revolution like 1917 or what, I'm not sure. But the longer Putin keeps going, the more uncertain I think his own position is going to be in the Russian Federation.
Peter, is there anything more that the rest of the world could be or should be doing to bring this to a conclusion?
Okay, well, our worry, of course, is that the longer this goes on, the more desperate Vladimir Putin becomes, and the more he reaches for terrible solutions and weapons of mass destruction. I think we've got to imagine this on both sides as two very long ladders, and each rung on the ladder is an escalation. And it might be an escalation of financial policy, of sanctions, an escalation of sort of military activity. But we're not at the top of the ladder. We're not even halfway up. So there's a lot more rungs to go. And that should give us reassurance that we're not about to tip into World War III or anything like that. We're in a Cold War. We've been in a Cold War, I would argue, since at least 2014. What's amazing is just how quickly the world has turned in 2 months, in 50 days, since Vladimir Putin ripped up the rule book that we've all known since the formation of NATO in 1949. This is far more significant, 24th of February when this kicked off. This is far more significant than 9/11. And the reverberations of this are going to go on for years and years. There are going to be whole new university departments founded on the way this suddenly took place. Our whole libraries are to be written in the next few decades, because this came totally out of the blue, and it's unlike anything that most people would have expected or anticipated in the 21st century, where we don't do this kind of brutal, heavy metal, Second World War type campaigning, and yet here we are right in the middle of it.
Well, I appreciate your thoughts this afternoon. Thank you for joining me, Professor Peter Caddick Adams. You've got a new book coming out soon, haven't you? In May, I think.
Yes, I have. It's 1945, Victory in the West. And I've completed it just before the Russian invasion of Ukraine took off. But there are all sorts of parallels, and I referred to one of them there. Victory in the West. It comes out on the 18th of May this year.
Well, I'll tell you what, why don't we get you back on the show near a publication date, and we can talk more about it then?
Graham, that would be absolutely fantastic.
Let's
Thank
do that.
you so
Let's
much
do that.
for that.
No,
well,
we will do that.
Weekend.
And I hope by the time we do talk about that book, hopefully we will be reaching more of a conclusion towards what's going on in the Ukraine. We can live in hope anyway, can't we? Peter, thank you for joining me. Indeed, have a good weekend yourself.
Thank you very much. Happy Easter.